I am Enid Morgan, 38 years old, and built a tech empire that nobody in my family knows about. 10 years ago, my sister Scarlett stole my millionaire fiancé James, leaving me heartbroken and alone. They flaunted their perfect life, while I disappeared to rebuild mine in silence. Tomorrow is our family reunion, where Scarlett will undoubtedly mock my single status again. Little does she know what awaits her. Let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share if you have ever been betrayed by someone you trusted. The revenge might not be what you expect. Before everything fell apart, I was thriving. By 28, I had climbed the corporate ladder at Horizon Marketing, one of the top advertising firms in Chicago. My colleagues respected me, my bosses promoted me, and clients specifically requested to work with me. I had a corner office with a view of Lake Michigan and the financial independence most people my age only dreamed of. Then James Wellington walked into our conference room for a pitch meeting. He was 34, charming, with piercing blue eyes and the confidence that came from building a multi-million-dollar investment portfolio before hitting 35. As our firm's new client, he was looking for a marketing strategy for his latest venture capital fund. I was assigned to lead his account, and what started as weekly business meetings soon turned into coffee breaks, then dinners, and finally a relationship that felt like something out of a fairy tale. James was intelligent, ambitious, and seemed to admire the same qualities in me. After 1 year of dating, he proposed on a private yacht on Lake Michigan, with the Chicago skyline glittering behind us. The ring was a 3-carat diamond that caught the light in ways that still haunt my dreams. Growing up, my younger sister Scarlett and I had a complicated relationship. 5 years my junior, she always seemed to be living in my shadow, at least according to our mother. While I was practical, studious, and driven, Scarlett was the free spirit, bouncing between jobs and relationships, never quite finding her footing. When I brought James home to meet my family, everyone was thrilled. Mom cried happy tears. Dad shook his hand with approval. But Scarlett, I should have noticed, watched him with an intensity that went beyond normal curiosity. The first red flag appeared during our engagement dinner. Scarlett wore a red dress that seemed a little too tight, a little too revealing for a family celebration. She sat next to James, laughing too loudly at his jokes, touching his arm when she spoke. I dismissed it as Scarlett being her usual attention-seeking self. When she offered to help James plan a surprise for me, I thought it was sweet. When she started texting him about wedding details, I appreciated her involvement. When she changed her hair to a style remarkably similar to mine, I laughed it off as sisterly admiration. I was blind to what was happening right in front of me. 3 months after our engagement, James started acting strange. Business meetings ran late. Weekend trips got canceled. He seemed distracted during our conversations, checking his phone more frequently than usual. I told myself it was just stress from his expanding business. One night, while James was in the shower, his phone lit up with a message that changed everything. It was from Scarlett. All I could see from the notification was, "Last night was amazing. I can't wait to." The rest was hidden, but those words were enough to crack the foundation of my perfect life. I stood there, phone in hand, debating whether to open the message and confirm my worst fears. The bathroom door opened, and James walked out, a towel around his waist. His smile faded when he saw me holding his phone, the color draining from his face in recognition of what I might have seen. I want to tell you, I handled that moment with dignity. That I calmly asked James about the message, listened to his explanation, and made a rational decision based on the facts. But that's not what happened. I confronted him immediately, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. James snatched the phone from my hand, quickly checking what I had seen. He claimed I was misinterpreting everything. The amazing night Scarlett referred to. Just them finalizing plans for my birthday surprise. The anticipation. Just excitement about my reaction. His explanation sounded rehearsed, hollow. But I wanted to believe him. Needed to believe him. So I pretended to accept his answer, all while a knot formed in my stomach. Over the next few weeks, I started noticing more signs. James' password protected his phone. His laptop would snap shut when I entered the room. He took calls in another room, his voice a hushed whisper I couldn't quite make out. Meanwhile, Scarlett underwent a transformation. She started wearing clothes that mirrored my style. Her makeup changed to match the natural look James once complimented me on. She even purchased the perfume I wore, claiming she always loved it but never told me. Family dinners became exercises in restraint. Scarlett would position herself next to James, their conversation flowing with an ease that made my skin crawl. When I would join in, there would be a momentary awkwardness, as if I were interrupting something private. One evening, Mom asked about our wedding plans over dessert. Before I could answer, Scarlett jumped in with suggestions about venues and color schemes, as if she were the bride. When I mentioned our plan for a destination wedding in Hawaii, Scarlett smiled and said, "Actually, James mentioned he was thinking about the Amalfi Coast instead." The familiarity with which she spoke about my fiancé's preferences felt like a slap across my face. The final confirmation came when I found ticket stubs for a concert in James' desk drawer. When questioned, he said he had gone with a business associate to see a potential venue for a corporate event. But I knew Scarlett had also been mysteriously unavailable that night, claiming to be down with a terrible migraine when Mom invited her for dinner. I decided to surprise James at his office, bringing lunch on a day I knew he had no external meetings. His assistant looked uncomfortable when I arrived, avoiding eye contact as she said James was in a meeting but should be done soon. I told her I'd wait in his office, and she didn't object. 20 minutes later, I heard laughter outside the door. James' voice, followed by a feminine giggle I recognized all too well. The door swung open, and there they were. James had his arm around Scarlett's waist, and she was leaning into him with the comfort of a lover. They froze when they saw me, the smiles evaporating from their faces. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The office, with its sleek modern furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows, suddenly felt suffocating. The three of us stood in a triangle of betrayal, no one speaking, the only sound my heart pounding in my ears. I wanted Scarlett to look guilty, to show some sign that she recognized the magnitude of her betrayal. Instead, she lifted her chin, her hand still clutching James' forearm. "What are you doing here, Enid?" James finally broke the silence, his voice unnervingly calm. I could barely form words. "I just came to bring you lunch. But it seems you already have company." Scarlett stepped forward. "We didn't want you to find out this way." "This way?" I repeated, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "As opposed to what way, exactly?" James walked toward me, hands extended as if approaching a frightened animal. "Enid, we need to talk. This isn't what you think." I laughed, a hollow sound that scared even me. "Not what I think. Please enlighten me. What exactly is happening here?" "We didn't plan this," Scarlett said, moving to stand beside James, their shoulders touching in a gesture of unity that made me nauseous. "It just happened. We fell in love." Those 3 words sliced through the last threads of my denial. My sister and my fiancé. In love. The engagement ring felt heavy on my finger, a mockery of the promises it represented. I slid it off and placed it on James' desk, the diamond catching the afternoon light, scattering tiny rainbows across the room. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I simply walked out, their voices calling after me fading as the elevator doors closed. That evening, James came to our apartment to collect his things. He had the decency to look ashamed as he explained that he never meant to hurt me, that sometimes the heart wants what it wants. "It's Scarlett," he said. "I can't explain it. We tried to fight it, but there's something between us that I can't ignore." I listened silently, wondering how the man I thought I knew could transform into this stranger before me. "I hope someday you can forgive us," he said as he left. We never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. And the life I had planned, the future I had imagined, walked out the door with him. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of pain and isolation. I called in sick to work, unable to face the pitying looks and whispered conversations I knew awaited me. After 2 weeks, I resigned via email, unable to explain how thoroughly my life had imploded. My apartment, once filled with photos of James and me, plans for our wedding, and dreams of our future, became a prison of memories I couldn't escape. I barely ate, hardly slept, and ignored the increasingly concerned calls from friends and coworkers. When my mother called, I expected sympathy, outrage on my behalf. Instead, she suggested I find a way to come to terms with the situation. "Honey, these things happen," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "James and Scarlett are very happy together. And in the end, isn't that what matters? That the people we love are happy." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own mother, asking me to accept my sister's betrayal for the sake of family harmony. As if my pain were an inconvenience to be swept aside, rather than a gaping wound that might never heal. "Your sister has always looked up to you," Mom continued. "Maybe this is just her way of trying to be more like you. By stealing my fiancé." I asked, bitterness seeping into every word. Mom sighed. "Enid, sometimes life takes unexpected turns. The question is whether you let those turns define you." 6 months after the confrontation in James' office, I received an elegant cream envelope in the mail. Inside was an invitation to James and Scarlett's wedding. My name was handwritten in calligraphy, a personal touch that felt like another twist of the knife. I didn't attend. Couldn't bear to watch my sister walk down the aisle to the man who had promised his life to me. But I saw the photos that flooded social media. Scarlett radiant in a designer gown that looked suspiciously similar to the one I had saved in my wedding inspiration folder. James beaming beside her, no trace of guilt or regret on his face. My former friends who attended told me it was the wedding of the year. Luxury flowed in every detail, from the 10,000 roses decorating the venue to the 7-tier cake that cost more than some people's monthly salary. Over the following months, Scarlett made sure I knew exactly how wonderful her new life was. She sent photos of their honeymoon in the Maldives, their new mansion in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, the custom sports car James bought her for her birthday. Each image was accompanied by saccharine messages. "Wish you could see this paradise." Or "Thinking of you as we enjoy our new home." These weren't olive branches. They were arrows, each one precisely aimed at the heart of my insecurities, reminders of everything I had lost and she had gained. The final straw came when Scarlett called to share the news that they were expecting a baby. "A niece or nephew for me," she said, as if this child would somehow bridge the chasm between us. That night, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life. I needed to leave. To go somewhere without the constant reminders of my humiliation. Somewhere I could rebuild without the shadow of Scarlett and James' happiness looming over me. Boston seemed far enough away, a city where I knew no one, and more importantly, where no one knew me or my story. I sold most of my possessions, leased my apartment, and left with 2 suitcases and a broken heart that I was determined to mend. My first weeks in Boston were lonely. I rented a small studio apartment that felt as empty as I did. But slowly, cautiously, I began to venture out. A coffee shop became my regular haunt, its quiet corner table a place where I could observe life continuing around me without having to participate. That's where I met Linda. 62 years old with silver hair and the sharpest mind I had ever encountered. She noticed me working on my laptop day after day and finally introduced herself. Linda, as it turned out, was a retired business consultant with decades of experience and an uncanny ability to see potential where others saw only obstacles. One afternoon, after listening to a very sanitized version of my story, Linda looked at me over her reading glasses and said, "So you've had your heart broken. Join the club, honey. The question is, what are you going to do with that pain?" I didn't have an answer. Linda leaned forward, eyes fierce with conviction. "You can let it destroy you, or you can use it as fuel. Painful experiences have a way of revealing our true strength. Maybe this is your opportunity to discover yours." Those words planted a seed. A tiny, fragile thing at first, but one that would eventually grow into something stronger than I could have imagined. With Linda's encouragement, I began to take inventory of my skills, my passions, the dreams I had set aside to support James' ambitions. I had always been interested in technology, in creating solutions to everyday problems, but James had dismissed my ideas as cute hobbies rather than viable business opportunities. Now, with nothing left to lose, I threw myself into learning. Coding boot camps, business seminars, networking events. I worked during the day at a marketing firm to pay the bills and studied at night until my eyes burned and my fingers cramped from typing. Linda became my mentor, her decades of business experience an invaluable resource as I began to formulate plans for my own company. She believed in me when I could barely believe in myself, pushed me when I wanted to give up, and celebrated every small victory along the way. 1 year after arriving in Boston, I launched Morgan Tech Solutions, a small startup focused on developing software for business optimization. The name was deliberate, a reclamation of my identity separate from the one I had nearly lost in the shadow of James' success. The beginning was hard. Harder than anything I had ever done. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, exhausted and afraid. Days when rejection after rejection made me question everything. But with each obstacle, the determination Linda had helped nurture grew stronger. I will not be defined by what was taken from me, I told myself on the darkest days. I will be defined by what I create. The first 2 years of Morgan Tech Solutions were an education in persistence. Every bank loan application was denied. Venture capitalists listened to my pitch with polite smiles before explaining why my idea wasn't quite what they were looking for. One particularly memorable investor suggested I find a male co-founder to give the company more credibility. I maxed out credit cards, sold my car, and took on freelance work to keep the company afloat. My tiny apartment doubled as an office, the kitchen table serving as both desk and conference room for the few clients who took a chance on us. Linda, true to her promise of mentorship, introduced me to her vast network of contacts. Most were politely dismissive, but a few saw potential in what I was building. Among them was David Hargrove, a small-scale investor with a reputation for backing underdogs. Our first meeting was scheduled for 30 minutes. It lasted 3 hours. David peppered me with questions, challenging my assumptions, pushing me to refine my vision. Where others saw limitations, he saw possibilities. Your software platform solves a real problem, he said as our meeting concluded. Businesses waste thousands of hours on inefficient processes, and your solution addresses that directly. It's not flashy, but it's useful. And useful beats flashy every time in the long run. With David's initial investment of $50,000, I was able to hire 2 developers and move operations to a small but proper office space. The investment wasn't just financial. David became a sounding board, a trusted advisor who believed in my vision even when I doubted it. Our first major breakthrough came 18 months after David's investment. A mid-sized manufacturing company implemented our software and saw a 22% increase in operational efficiency within the first quarter. They became evangelical about our product, referring us to partners and suppliers. Suddenly, we had a waiting list of clients. As the company grew, so did my confidence. The woman who had left Chicago broken and humiliated was fading, replaced by someone stronger, more resilient. I no longer flinched when I heard James' name mentioned in business circles. I no longer felt a pang when passing bridal shops or seeing happy couples. David and I developed a partnership based on mutual respect and shared vision. Unlike my relationship with James, where I often felt I needed to diminish my ambitions to avoid threatening his ego, David celebrated my success. He challenged me to think bigger, to see beyond immediate goals to the potential empire we could build. When a major tech magazine requested an interview about the rapid growth of Morgan Tech Solutions, I agreed on one condition. No photos, no personal details. I wanted the company, not me, to be the focus. The article, titled The Invisible Revolution, highlighted our innovative approach without ever mentioning my connection to the Wellington investment empire. It was exactly how I wanted it. 5 years after leaving Chicago, Morgan Tech Solutions was valued at $70 million. We had offices in Boston, New York, and San Francisco, with a team of over 100 talented individuals who shared my vision. Our client list included Fortune 500 companies, and our software was being implemented across multiple industries. Through it all, I maintained my privacy. I lived well but modestly, investing profits back into the company rather than flaunting wealth. My social media presence was non-existent, a deliberate choice to keep my success separate from my past. The only people who knew the full extent of my accomplishment were those directly involved in the company. David often questioned this approach. Why not let the world, especially James and Scarlett, see what you've built? He asked during a celebratory dinner after we closed a particularly lucrative deal. I shook my head. This isn't about them. It never was. But David knew me well enough to see through the deflection. Isn't it? At least partly. Perhaps I admitted. But revealing myself now would change the narrative. What I've built would become about my relationship with them rather than what it is. A successful company built on innovation and hard work. I am not ready for that. David didn't push further. He understood my need to separate past from present, to protect what I had created from being diminished by association with the pain that had, in many ways, catalyzed it. Then, 7 years into my self-imposed exile, everything changed with a single phone call. Enid. The voice was hesitant, fragile in a way I had never heard before. It's Mom. My mother rarely called, our relationship strained by her perceived choosing of Scarlett's happiness over my pain. What's wrong? I asked, instantly alert to the tension in her voice. I am sick, she said simply. Cancer. The doctors are optimistic, but the treatment will be difficult. I know things have been complicated, but I would like to see you. In that moment, all the carefully maintained distance collapsed. Whatever had happened between us, she was still my mother, and she needed me. I'll come, I promised. Next week. After the call ended, I sat in my office, looking out at the Boston skyline as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I had successfully avoided returning to my hometown for years, building a life completely separate from my past. Now, I would have to face it all again. Scarlett. James. The life they had built on the ruins of mine. David found me still sitting there hours later, lost in thought. Everything okay? He asked, leaning against the doorframe. I need to go home, I said. My mother's sick. He nodded, understanding immediately the weight of what this meant. Do you want company? His offer touched me deeply. In the years we had worked together, David had become more than a business partner. He was a friend, perhaps my closest one. Still, the thought of him witnessing my past felt vulnerable in a way I wasn't sure I was ready for. Let me think about it, I said. That night, as I packed for the trip, I received an email from my mother with details about a family gathering planned for the weekend after my arrival. Everyone will be there, she wrote. It would mean so much to have you with us. Everyone. Scarlett and James, of course. The perfect couple with their perfect life. I called David. Can you come with me after all? I asked without preamble. Name the time and place, he replied without hesitation. I'll be there. The drive back to my hometown felt like traveling backward in time. Each mile marker brought me closer to a version of myself I had worked hard to leave behind. The quiet, broken Enid who had fled in the night, tail between her legs. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, reminding myself of who I was now. CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. A woman who had rebuilt her life from scratch. Someone who no longer needed approval or validation from those who had hurt her. David had flown in separately and was waiting at the hotel. We agreed he would join me at the family gathering the following day, rather than accompanying me to my first reunion with my mother. Some moments needed to be faced alone. My childhood home looked smaller than I remembered, the red brick exterior weathered by time, the garden my mother had once tended meticulously now maintained by a service. I sat in the rental car for several minutes, gathering courage before walking up the familiar path to the front door. Mom answered my knock, and the sight of her took my breath away. She had always been vibrant, full of energy despite her 68 years. Now she seemed diminished, her frame thinner, her once dark hair completely silver and cut short. But her eyes, when they met mine, were the same. "Enid," she whispered, opening her arms. I stepped into her embrace, the years of hurt and distance melting away in the familiar scent of her perfume. We both cried, holding each other in the doorway, neither willing to be the first to let go. Inside, over tea in the kitchen, where I had spent so many hours of my childhood, we began the careful dance of reconnection. Mom didn't ask about my work, assuming I realized that I was still in marketing. I didn't correct her. Not yet. It wasn't the time for revelations. Instead, she told me about her diagnosis, the treatment plan, her determination to fight. I listened, holding her hand across the table, promising to help however I could. The past, with all its complications, seemed insignificant in the face of her illness. "Tomorrow everyone will be here," she said as evening approached. "Your father, your cousins, Aunt Lisa, and of course, Scarlett and James with little William." William. My nephew, now 7 years old. A child I had never met, knew only through the occasional photos my mother sent against my wishes. Mom hesitated, then added, "It means a lot that you're coming." "I know it's not easy." I forced a smile. "It's fine. It will be good to see everyone." The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but what else could I say? That the thought of seeing Scarlett and James made me physically ill. That I had spent years carefully constructing a life where their names were never mentioned. The next morning, I dressed with deliberate casualness. Dark jeans, a simple blouse, minimal jewelry. I could have worn designer clothes, accessories that subtly signaled success. But something held me back. A desire to observe before being observed, perhaps. To understand the dynamics before revealing my cards. David met me at the house, his presence a steadying force as cars began filling the driveway. Family members I hadn't seen in years greeted me with varying degrees of awkwardness. Some embraced me warmly, others offered stiff handshakes and stilted conversation, clearly uncertain how to navigate the tension they expected. My father, gray now but still tall and imposing, hugged me tightly. "I've missed you, kiddo," he whispered against my hair. More than I can say. That admission, so unlike his usually reserved demeanor, nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. I had missed him too, more than I had allowed myself to acknowledge. As the house filled with familiar voices and laughter, I introduced David as my colleague, watching closely for reactions. Most accepted the introduction at face value, though my father gave him a particularly thorough handshake and assessing look that made me smile despite my nerves. I was in the kitchen helping Mom arrange a platter of food when the front door opened again, and a child's excited voice filled the entryway. Then came the voice I had both dreaded and, in some secret corner of my heart, longed to hear. "We're here," Scarlett called out, her tone bright with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. I stayed where I was, busying myself with the meaningless rearrangement of fruit on a platter, while Mom hurried out to greet them. Through the doorway, I could see her embracing Scarlett, then James, then kneeling with some effort to hug a small boy with dark hair who could only be William. Then Scarlett stepped into the kitchen, and time seemed to fold in on itself. My sister, now 33, was still beautiful, her features sharpened with maturity but essentially unchanged. She wore a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, diamonds at her ears and throat, her hair styled in loose waves that looked effortlessly perfect. She froze when she saw me, a flicker of something unidentifiable crossing her face before she composed herself into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Enid," she said, her voice a carefully modulated mix of surprise and warmth. "You actually came. Mom said you might, but I didn't quite believe it." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak immediately. 10 years of absence, of hurt, of rebuilding, condensed into this single moment. "It's good to see you," I finally managed, the social nicety automatic rather than sincere. Scarlett crossed the kitchen, moving with the grace of someone accustomed to being watched, and air-kissed my cheek. "You look the same," she said, her gaze sweeping over my simple outfit, lingering on my bare ring finger. The implied criticism was clear. Same meant unchanged, unimproved, stuck in place while she had clearly moved forward upward. "Thanks," I replied dryly. "You look exactly as I expected." She didn't catch the ambiguity in my response, taking it as a compliment with a practiced smile. James appeared in the doorway then, William half hidden behind his legs. He had aged well, silver threading through his dark hair in a way that added distinction rather than years. His eyes met mine, and I was surprised to feel nothing. No pain, no anger, no lingering attraction. Just a distant recognition of someone who had once been important to me. "Enid," he said, voice careful, controlled. "It's been too long." "Has it?" I responded, my tone neutral. An awkward silence fell, broken only when William tugged at his father's pant leg and stage whispered, "Is that her?" "The aunt we never see." James flushed, gently guiding his son forward. "Yes, this is your Aunt Enid. Say hello." William regarded me with open curiosity, his eyes, so similar to his father's, assessing me without the complications of adult history. "Hi," he said simply. "Hello, William," I replied, smiling genuinely for the first time since arriving. "It's nice to meet you." The moment was interrupted by my mother announcing that everyone should move to the backyard, where tables had been set up. As people filed out, Scarlett lingered, waiting until we were alone in the kitchen. So she said, leaning against the counter with studied casualness, "Tell me about your life, Enid. What have you been up to for the past decade?" The question, innocent on its surface, carried undercurrents of superiority, of pity poorly disguised as interest. "Working," I said simply. "Living." Scarlett laughed, the sound sharp rather than amused. "That's it. 10 years, and all you have to say is you're working and living." I shrugged. Not everyone documents every moment of their existence for public consumption, Scarlett. Her eyes narrowed slightly at the dig. I caught it then. "You still follow me on social media?" "I don't, actually," I replied honestly. "I haven't looked at your profiles in years." This seemed to annoy her more than if I had admitted to stalking her online life. "If you had," she said, lifting her chin, "you'd know that James and I just bought a lake house. 5,000 square feet, private dock, incredible views. William's learning to sail." "That's nice," I said, unable to muster enthusiasm for her material acquisitions. Scarlett studied me, her expression calculating. "And what about your love life, Enid? Anyone special?" Before I could answer, David appeared in the doorway. "There you are," he said warmly. "Your father is asking for you outside." Scarlett's gaze swiveled to him, interest immediately piqued by his appearance and the easy familiarity with which he addressed me. "And you are?" she asked, extending her hand with a smile that transformed her face, making her look suddenly younger, more like the sister I had once adored. "David Hargrove," he replied, shaking her hand briefly. "Enid's colleague." "Colleague," Scarlett repeated, looking between us with obvious disbelief. "Just colleague." David smiled enigmatically, neither confirming nor denying her implication, and offered me his arm. "Shall we?" As we walked toward the backyard, Scarlett fell into step beside us, her curiosity evident in every glance. Once outside, she quickly maneuvered to seat herself across from us at the long table, James beside her, William between them. The meal progressed with the forced joviality of a family trying too hard to pretend everything was normal. Conversation flowed around safe topics. Weather, local news, distant relatives. I observed more than participated, noting how Scarlett commanded attention, how James deferred to her in small but significant ways, how my parents still treated her with the indulgence that had characterized her childhood. It was during dessert that Scarlett finally made her move. Glass of wine in hand, slightly flushed from her third or fourth refill, she leaned forward, eyes fixed on me. "So really, Enid. No husband. No children. Not even a steady boyfriend at 38. The table fell silent, forks pausing mid-bite, the question hanging in the air like a grenade with its pin removed. "No," I said evenly. "None of the above." Scarlett clicked her tongue in exaggerated sympathy. "That's so sad. I always hoped you'd find someone after." "Well, after everything." The after everything hung in the air, a deliberate reminder of her victory, of my loss. "I am perfectly content with my life," I said, maintaining my composure despite the deliberate provocation. Scarlett laughed, the sound brittle and sharp. "Content? Is that what we call it now? I mean, let's be honest, Enid. You're a 38, single, still working some marketing job." She gestured vaguely with her wine glass, wine sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "When exactly is your life supposed to start?" My father cleared his throat warningly. "Scarlett, that's enough." But she was too far into her performance to stop now, the audience she had cultivated over years of social media validation spurring her on. "No, Dad, I am worried about my big sister." She paused, taking another sip of wine before delivering her coup de grace. "She's turning into a pathetic spinster right before our eyes." The word spinster, so deliberately chosen, so intentionally cruel, landed like a slap. Around the table, people shifted uncomfortably, gazes dropping to plates, no one willing to challenge Scarlett directly. "I've looked you up, she continued, emboldened by the silence. "No presence online, no accomplishments worth mentioning. What exactly have you been doing with your life, while the rest of us have been moving forward?" James placed a hand on her arm. "That's enough, Scarlett." She shook him off, eyes still fixed on me, waiting for the hurt, the humiliation, the acknowledgement of her superior life choices that she so clearly craved. But I wasn't the same woman who had fled Chicago 10 years ago. I met her gaze steadily, neither flinching nor firing back. "Your concern is noted," I said calmly. My lack of reaction clearly disappointed her. She had expected tears, perhaps, or angry denials. Anything but this composed acceptance. "Well," she said with a forced laugh, pushing back from the table. "I guess some people are just meant for bigger things than others. Not everyone can handle the kind of life James and I have built." She stood, smoothing her designer dress. "Speaking of which, we should get going. William has sailing lessons tomorrow morning at the lake house." As they prepared to leave, making their rounds of goodbyes, I remained seated, observing the performance with detached interest. James approached me last, his expression inscrutable. "It was good to see you, Enid," he said quietly. "You're looking well." "Thank you," I replied, wondering if he actually believed that was an adequate response after 10 years and everything that had happened between us. Scarlett reappeared at his side, slipping her arm through his possessively. "Ready, darling." As they walked away, Scarlett turned back for one final parting shot, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's such a shame, isn't it? She used to have so much potential. Now look at her, almost 40 and nothing to show for it. No husband, no children, not even a career worth mentioning." The door closed behind them, and the gathered family members exchanged uncomfortable glances, no one quite sure how to address what had just happened. David, who had remained a silent, supportive presence throughout the exchange, leaned close to my ear. "Are you ready?" I nodded, suddenly certain about what I needed to do next. The family gathering continued in awkward silence after Scarlett and James' departure. Relatives busied themselves with cleanup, conversations resuming in hushed tones, careful glances cast in my direction to gauge my reaction to Scarlett's public humiliation attempt. I sat quietly, phone in hand, typing a message to David, who had returned to the hotel to retrieve something at my request. "Just the essential files, please. And the presentation from last quarter." Across the table, my father watched me with concern. "You okay, kiddo?" I looked up, meeting his gaze with a smile that felt surprisingly genuine. "I am better than okay, Dad. For the first time in years, I feel completely clear about something." He nodded slowly, confusion evident in his expression but not questioning further. "That's my girl." Mom appeared at my elbow, her face lined with worry. "I am so sorry about Scarlett. She shouldn't have spoken to you that way." Especially not here, not when you've finally come home. I patted her hand reassuringly. It's not your fault, Mom. And don't worry. I am not upset. You're not. Her surprise was evident. But the things she said were exactly what I needed to hear. I finished for her. Or rather, what I needed everyone else to hear. Before she could ask what I meant, there was a knock at the front door. My cousin Amy went to answer it, returning moments later with David. He carried a slim leather portfolio and wore an expression that could only be described as anticipatory. Who's this? My father asked, straightening in his chair, protective instincts engaged despite my age. Everyone, I said, rising to stand beside David. This is David Hargrove. I introduced him earlier as my colleague, which is true, but not the complete story. All eyes turned to us with renewed interest. The afternoon's drama temporarily forgot in favor of this new development. Several relatives exchanged knowing glances, clearly assuming I was about to announce a romantic relationship. David is my business partner, I continued. And he's here to help me clear up some misconceptions about my life. My mother frowned slightly. What misconceptions, dear? Instead of answering directly, I turned to my father. Dad, do you remember how James always dismissed my interest in technology? How he called my ideas about business efficiency software cute little projects? My father nodded slowly. I remember thinking he was wrong to do that. You always had good instincts for that sort of thing. I agreed. And after I left Chicago, I decided to pursue those instincts. David opened the portfolio and removed several glossy business magazines, passing them around the table. My relatives leaned forward, confusion turning to shock as they recognized my face on the covers. Enid Morgan, tech industry's rising star. The invisible CEO behind Morgan Tech Solutions' $200 million valuation. Silence descended as they absorbed this information, flipping through pages that documented my company's meteoric rise, innovations, and impact on the industry. You founded a tech company. My mother finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I confirmed. Morgan Tech Solutions. We specialize in business efficiency software and have expanded into artificial intelligence applications for corporate environments. We're currently valued at just over $200 million, with offices in 7 cities and clients across 4 continents. The stunned silence that followed was broken by my cousin Amy. Holy shit, Enid. The crude but honest reaction broke the tension, laughter rippling around the table as the magnitude of my revelation sank in. Why didn't you tell us? My father asked, hurt evident in his voice. I wanted to build something on my own terms, I explained gently, without expectations or comparisons. And honestly, after what happened with James and Scarlett, I needed a clean break. A fresh start where I wasn't defined by my relationship to them. Understanding dawned in my father's eyes. And now I smiled, reaching for my phone as it buzzed with an incoming message. It seems the right time for everyone to know the truth, including James and Scarlett. David checked his own phone, nodding confirmation. They're on their way back. Your message about your mother's sudden illness was quite effective. My mother startled. But I am not. Playing along, I reassured her with a wink. Just a small white lie to get them back here. I promise it will be worth it. 20 minutes later, the front door burst open, Scarlett rushing in with James close behind, both looking concerned. Mom, Scarlett called out. What's wrong? The text said. She stopped abruptly, taking in the scene. The family gathered around the table, magazines spread out, expressions varying from amusement to anticipation. Her gaze landed on me, standing at the head of the table, David beside me. What's going on? She asked, wariness replacing concern. Where's Mom? I'm right here, dear, my mother said, rising from her seat. Quite well, as you can see. But the text, James began, confusion evident. That was from me, I interjected smoothly. I thought you might want to be here for this conversation. Scarlett's expression hardened. What conversation? The one where I finally tell everyone the truth about my pathetic spinster life, I replied, deliberately echoing her earlier words. James had the grace to look uncomfortable, his gaze dropping to the magazines scattered across the table. His eyes widened as recognition dawned. Morgan Tech Solutions, he read slowly, looking up at me with dawning comprehension. That's you. I nodded. Founded 8 years ago. Currently valued at $203 million, to be precise. Scarlett looked between us, confusion and suspicion warring in her expression. What are you talking about? Your sister, David explained with professional courtesy that did nothing to hide his underlying satisfaction, is the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the country. Her business efficiency software has revolutionized operations for hundreds of corporations, including, as of last month, Wellington Investments. James paled visibly. Wellington Investments? His company. The acquisition went through. He asked, voice hollow. Morgan Tech was the buyer. I nodded, allowing myself a small smile. The deal closed last week. Your board was quite enthusiastic about the offer, given the difficulties you've been experiencing. Scarlett turned to James, alarm replacing her earlier smugness. What is she talking about? What acquisition? James swallowed hard, unable to meet his wife's questioning gaze. The company has been struggling for several years. The downturn in the market, some unfortunate investment decisions. I had to sell a controlling interest to stay afloat. You sold our company. Scarlett's voice rose with each word. Without telling me. Technically my company, James corrected quietly. And I was going to tell you after the deal was finalized, and I knew exactly what it meant for our financial situation. The implication hung heavily in the air. The luxury lifestyle Scarlett had so proudly flaunted was built on increasingly shaky foundations. Financial situation. She repeated, color draining from her face. What about the lake house? William's private school. My charity gala next month. James looked at her with a mixture of resignation and relief, as if a weight he had carried alone was finally being shared. We can't afford those things anymore, Scarlett. We haven't been able to for some time. I've been taking loans against the house just to maintain appearances. Scarlett staggered slightly, gripping the back of a chair for support. This can't be happening. She turned to me, accusation blazing in her eyes. You did this on purpose. You bought his company to ruin us. I shook my head. I bought a struggling company with good bones and a solid client base because it's a sound business decision. I didn't know it was James' company until the final stages of negotiation. The holding company name had changed. You expect me to believe that? Scarlett spat, anger replacing shock. This is revenge, pure and simple. David stepped forward, his professional demeanor a stark contrast to the emotional tension filling the room. As Ms. Morgan's legal counsel, I should clarify that the acquisition was handled through standard channels. Mr. Wellington's identity as the principal was not disclosed until the due diligence phase, at which point the deal was already substantially progressed. James nodded reluctant confirmation. That's true. I kept my name off the paperwork deliberately. I didn't want news of the sale to affect client confidence prematurely. Scarlett looked between them, disbelief evident in every line of her body. So what happens now? You're firing my husband. Taking everything we've built. Actually, I replied calmly, the acquisition agreement includes a provision for James to remain as CEO of the Wellington division, reporting directly to me. His experience and client relationships are valuable assets we'd like to retain. James' head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. You want me to stay on? With conditions, I clarified. Complete financial transparency. A restructuring of certain operations. And a salary commensurate with the company's actual performance rather than its projected value. Translation. A significant pay cut, David added helpfully. The implications of this new reality visibly sank in for Scarlett. The lake house. The private schools. The designer wardrobe. The social status shed, cultivated so carefully. All built on a financial house of cards that had finally collapsed. You can't do this, she whispered, though whether to me or James or the universe at large wasn't clear. I already have, I replied, not unkindly. The papers are signed. The transition begins next week. Scarlett turned to James, desperation plain on her face. Fix this. You always fix things. For perhaps the first time in their relationship, James didn't immediately move to smooth Scarlett's path. There's nothing to fix, he said quietly. The company was failing. Without this deal, we would have lost everything within months. At least this way we keep our house, our basic lifestyle. We're just going to have to scale back. Significantly. Scale back. Scarlett repeated, as if the words were in a foreign language. Like. What? Shop at regular stores. Sell the Bentley. Among other things, James confirmed. Scarlett turned back to me, her expression shifting from shock to calculation. This doesn't have to be adversarial, Enid. We're family. Surely we can work something out that benefits everyone. The transparent attempt to manipulate the situation, to find an angle that preserved her advantage, was so quintessentially Scarlett that I almost laughed. Even now, faced with the collapse of her carefully constructed facade, she was looking for leverage. The arrangement already benefits everyone, I pointed out. James keeps his position, albeit with adjusted compensation. The company survives rather than declares bankruptcy. And you. The family gathered around the table held its collective breath, waiting for the final blow. You get the opportunity to build something real, Scarlett. Something that isn't taken from someone else. Scarlett flinched as if Id slapped her. Is that what you think? That I took your life? Didn't you? I asked quietly. She shook her head, defiance warring with a dawning realization. I fell in love. We both did. It wasn't about you. Wasn't it? I pressed gently. The man I was engaged to. The lifestyle I was building. Even my clothes, my hairstyle, my perfume. You didn't just want James, Scarlett. You wanted to be me. The words hung in the air between us, a truth so long unspoken that giving it voice seemed to alter the very atmosphere of the room. Around the table, relatives sat motionless, unwilling to interrupt the moment of reckoning 10 years in the making. Tears welled in Scarlett's eyes, whether from anger or recognition, I couldn't tell. You always had everything, she said, voice breaking. The grades, the career, the perfect fiancé. Everyone always said, why can't you be more like Enid? I just wanted. She trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. To prove you could take it all away, I finished for her. To show everyone you could be better than me. That you could win. James placed a hand on Scarlett's shoulder, his expression troubled. I think that's enough. But it wasn't. Not yet. I don't want revenge, Scarlett, I said, surprised to discover the truth of my own words as I spoke them. I don't want to punish you or take away your happiness. What I want, what I've built, has nothing to do with either of you anymore. This acquisition is business, not personal. Bullshit, Scarlett snapped, tears flowing freely now. You show up after 10 years, reveal you're some secret millionaire, and buy my husband's company and expect me to believe it's not personal. I believe her, James said quietly. Scarlett whirled to face him. What? He met her gaze steadily. I believe it's not about revenge. The Enid I knew 10 years ago might have wanted that. But this woman, he gestured toward me. She's different. Stronger. She doesn't need to prove anything to us. His assessment, surprisingly insightful, hung in the air between us. An acknowledgement of who I had become, separate from the shared history that had once defined us. Scarlett looked between us, seeming to sense a shift in power she couldn't quite grasp. So what happens now? She finally asked, voice small. Now, I said, gathering the magazines and returning them to David's portfolio, we all move forward. James works with my team on the transition. You both adjust to your new financial reality. and I returned to Boston to continue building my company. That's it? Scarlett asked, disbelief evident. No demands. No conditions. Just one, I replied. Stop pretending. Stop building your life around what you want others to see rather than what actually brings you fulfillment. The facade was crumbling anyway. Now you have the chance to build something real. Scarlett stared at me, a complex mixture of emotions crossing her face: anger, humiliation, and underneath it all, a grudging respect she would probably never acknowledge. You've changed, she finally said. I nodded. We all have. Or at least we all can. As David and I prepared to leave, my family still processing the afternoon's revelations, James approached me one last time. I didn't know, he said quietly. About your company, your success. I am impressed. And I think I understand now why we wouldn't have worked, even without. He trailed off, unable to directly reference his betrayal. Without you leaving me for my sister. I supplied, surprised by how little pain the words now carried. He had the grace to look ashamed. Yes. That. I considered him for a moment, this man who had once been the center of my world, now looking smaller somehow, less substantial than the shadow he cast over my life. You're right, I agreed. We wouldn't have worked. You needed someone to admire you, not challenge you. As David and I walked to the car, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if a weight I hadn't fully acknowledged had been lifted. Not because I'd humiliated Scarlett or reclaimed some power over James, but because in facing them, I had finally, truly let them go. The months following my return to Chicago unfolded in ways I could never have predicted. James, true to the terms of the acquisition, stepped into his role as divisional CEO with surprising dedication. Free from the pressure of maintaining a facade of success, he focused on rebuilding the core strengths of the company, his natural business instincts flourishing under the structure and transparency I required. Our professional relationship remained exactly that: professional. The past was acknowledged but not dwelled upon, a shared history that informed our present without defining it. In our weekly video conferences, we discussed projections and strategies, client retention and team dynamics, never once venturing into personal territory. It was, perhaps, the most honest relationship we'd ever had. Scarlett's adjustment proved more challenging. The scaling back James had warned of became their new reality. The lake house was sold. William transferred from his exclusive private academy to a well-regarded public school. The Bentley was replaced by a luxury SUV that, while still expensive by normal standards, represented a significant step down in Scarlett's carefully cultivated social hierarchy. Mom kept me updated on these developments during our newly established Sunday phone calls, her health improving with successful treatment, and, I like to think, the healing of our family rifts. She reported that Scarlett had initially spiraled into depression, her identity so thoroughly entangled with her material possessions and social status that their loss felt like an erasure of self. She's lost all her friends, Mom confided one Sunday. Or rather, realized they were never really friends to begin with. Once the invitations to the lake house stopped, once she couldn't host extravagant parties or join expensive spa weekends, they simply drifted away. I felt a pang of empathy despite everything. Scarlett had built her life around others' perceptions, constructing a beautiful but hollow facade. Its collapse was inevitable, but no less painful for its predictability. 4 months after the family gathering, I received an unexpected email from Scarlett herself. It was brief, just a few lines, but represented a seismic shift in our relationship. Enid, I've been offered a position with a local marketing firm. It's entry-level, but they were impressed with my social media portfolio. I start next week. I thought you should know. Scarlett. No apology, no direct acknowledgement of our past conflict, but something more valuable. A step toward self-sufficiency, toward building rather than taking. I replied with simple congratulations and an offer of professional advice should she ever need it. She didn't respond, but I hadn't expected her to. Some bridges take longer to rebuild than others. Meanwhile, my own life continued its upward trajectory. Morgan Tech Solutions expanded into international markets, our valuation climbing steadily as new applications for our software emerged. David and I spent increasingly more time together, our professional partnership gradually evolving into something more personal. Though we both approached this new dimension of our relationship with the caution of people who understood the value of what they stood to gain and lose. Linda, now semi-retired but still my most trusted advisor, watched this development with barely concealed satisfaction. "You two took your sweet time," she observed over dinner at my Boston apartment, David in the kitchen preparing dessert. "I've been waiting years for you to see what's right in front of you." "I had to be ready," I told her simply. She nodded, understanding without further explanation. The heart has its own timeline for healing. 1 year after the revelation at my parents' home, I returned for another family gathering, this one a celebration of my mother's remission. David accompanied me, our relationship now openly acknowledged, though we had consciously decided against the formality of engagement or marriage, both preferring to let our connection evolve naturally without the weight of labels or expectations. The atmosphere was markedly different from the previous year. Family members greeted me with genuine warmth rather than awkward uncertainty. My success was no longer a shocking revelation, but an established fact. My relationship with David integrated into the family narrative. Scarlett and James arrived last, the dynamic between them subtly altered. Scarlett wore a simple dress, still elegant but lacking the ostentatious designer labels of the previous year. The diamonds were gone, replaced by a single pendant necklace that I recognized as our grandmother's. More striking than these external changes was the shift in her demeanor. The brittle edge of defensive superiority had softened, replaced by a quieter confidence that seemed to come from within rather than from others' validation. Our greeting was civil, even warm in a careful way, both of us navigating the new landscape of our relationship. James, more relaxed than I had seen him in years, greeted David with the easy camaraderie of colleagues who had developed genuine respect for each other. William, now 8 and seemingly oblivious to the complex adult dynamics surrounding him, was simply delighted to see his aunt again, proudly showing me his science fair medal and chattering about his new school. During a quiet moment as the family settled around the dinner table, Scarlett approached me on the patio where I had stepped out for a moment of solitude. "Your company just approved my marketing proposal," she said without preamble. "For the Wellington division rebrand." I nodded. It was good work. Creative, focused, practical. She blinked, clearly surprised by the direct praise. "Thanks. I'm not just saying this because you're technically my boss now, but I actually love the work. I should have done this years ago. Instead of trying to take my life, you mean?" The words slipped out before I could stop them, more direct than I had intended. To my surprise, Scarlett didn't flinch or deny. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "Exactly that." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of her acknowledgement settling between us, not erasing the past, but perhaps creating space for something new. "I never really wanted your life, Enid," she finally said, gaze fixed on the garden beyond the patio. "I wanted a life that mattered. I just didn't know how to build one for myself. It seemed easier to take yours." The honesty of her admission, stripped of justification or defense, was perhaps the closest thing to an apology I would ever receive from Scarlett. And somehow it was enough. "I understand that now," I told her. "And for what it's worth, it looks like you're building something worthwhile now." She offered a small, genuine smile, the first I had seen from her in more than a decade. "I am trying. It's harder than it looks." I laughed softly. The things worth having usually are. As we returned inside to join the family dinner, I reflected on the long, winding path that had brought me to this moment. 10 years ago, I had fled Chicago broken and defeated, convinced that Scarlett and James had taken everything of value from me. In losing what I thought was my whole world, I had been forced to discover just how much more the world contained, how much more I contained. The pain had been real, the betrayal devastating. But in that destruction lay the seeds of a reconstruction I could never have imagined. Morgan Tech Solutions had emerged not from a desire for revenge or validation, but from the simple necessity of rebuilding a life that was entirely my own. In stripping away everything familiar, Scarlett and James had unwittingly given me the opportunity to discover my true capacity, strengths I might never have recognized had my life proceeded along its comfortable, expected path. As I looked around the dinner table at my family, now expanded to include David and reshaped by the events of the past year, I realized that the greatest victory wasn't in surpassing Scarlett's material success or becoming James' boss. It wasn't even in building a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. The victory was in finding freedom from the need for their approval or defeat. In building a life so completely my own that their opinions, whether positive or negative, had become irrelevant to my sense of self-worth. The pain of betrayal had been transformed into something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the betrayal itself, but for the journey it had forced me to undertake, for the woman I had become because of rather than despite it. Later that night, as David and I prepared to leave, Scarlett approached me one last time. "I know we can't go back," she said, an uncharacteristic hesitancy in her voice. "Too much has happened. But do you think maybe we could go forward as something more than strangers?" I considered her question, weighing the past against the possible future. "I'd like that," I said finally. "One step at a time." She nodded, relief evident in her expression. One step at a time. As we drove away from my childhood home, David glanced over at me. "You okay?" I smiled, feeling the truth of my answer deep in my bones. "Better than okay. I feel complete." The greatest lesson I've learned through all of this is that sometimes the worst moments of our lives create the foundation for our best selves. When Scarlett took James, I thought she'd stolen my future. In reality, she had inadvertently pushed me toward a far better one than I could have imagined. The pain we experience doesn't have to define us. It can refine us if we let it, burning away what isn't essential and revealing a core of strength we never knew existed. True power isn't in possessing things or people, but in creating value that can't be taken because it comes from within. Sometimes I wonder if I would have discovered my true capabilities if James had never left with Scarlett. If the comfortable life we'd planned had unfolded without interruption. The woman I was then might have been content, but she would never have known the depths of resilience and creativity that lived within her. In the end, perhaps the most valuable things in life aren't what we keep, but what we build after losing everything we thought we needed. What about you? Have you ever had something taken from you that ultimately led to greater strength? Has betrayal ever become the foundation for your growth? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that their current pain could be leading them toward their greatest triumph. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, always believe in your ability to rise from the ashes of what was taken and build something even more beautiful in its place.